tablets. Others were given the Depo-Purval injection. This is an injection that makes it so that you don't get pregnant for up to 3 months. And others were taken for ultrasounds in between the sales. At the same time, there were numerous violations. So there were women who would tell me that they were with fighters 1 through 3, and fighters 1 through 3 gave them birth control and then tested for pregnancy, and then they go to fighter number 4 and 5, and those guys didn't check. So it was not uniform. There were people who were violating it, but the fact that they were mostly applying it, there's something quite sickening to me about it. There's something so calculated about essentially treating these women like an object that would become damaged if it became pregnant. Everything else you do to it is okay, but that's the one thing that needs to be avoided.
Did the women know that they were being given birth control? Did they know what the pills were?
Initially, some of them said that some of these girls were so young. They're 16, 17, and younger. And one of them that I interviewed, who I think is in the lead of my story, she talks about how he came and he gave her this packet of pills, and it had 3 lines of white pills and then 1 line of red pills. And she didn't know what it was, and he would come and berate her every day and watch her put the pill under her tongue. And then it was, I think, another woman in the house who explained to her what it was for. The interesting thing is that this, of course, was the one aspect of their perverted theology that very much was in line with what the victims wanted. None of them wanted to get pregnant. So when they learned that the pills, the injections, the trips to the doctor, that was to avoid pregnancy, they were on board because they of course did not want to be carrying their rapist child.
So the ISIS men who raped these women and used them as sex slaves, they believed that the Quran gave them justification to do it as long as the women didn't get pregnant.
Yes. The Quran has about more than a dozen references to the phrase, those your right hand possesses. And what scholars of Islam have explained to me is that phrase means a slave. And that phrase comes up in sections that deal with what are the licit forms of sexual intercourse that a man can have. So you can have sex with your wife. You can't have sex with anybody else except those your right hand possesses, right? Now, what scholars explain to me is that even though the Quran lays out slavery as one of the licit forms of sex with a woman, what ISIS has done is, of course, taken it to a different level. They're not just saying that it's licit; they're saying that it's holy. They're saying that because it was in their eyes practiced by the Prophet Muhammad, it is therefore a sacred duty to rape these poor women. And some of the most heartbreaking interviews I did were with women who described how the fighters would pray before they raped them. They would then rape them, they would go and take a shower, and then they'd come back and pray again. Because to them, the act of the rape was, I don't know how else to put it, but almost like an act of communion.
You hear that, Trump?
Leaves me speechless. And the women who you interviewed who were used as sex slaves, they were mostly Yazidi women, members of a religious minority who ISIS basically practiced genocide on. I mean,
Yes.
So these were women who were taken while other Yazidis were being just like wiped out.
Right. The only women I've spoken to are Yazidi women, and it seems that ISIS singled out this particular ethnic group for this very crime. There have been a few anecdotal cases of Christian women being taken as sex slaves and a few anecdotal cases of Shia women being taken. And of course, we know that the terrible story of the American aid worker, Kyla Mueller, who was also taken in this manner. But those accounts are very much at the anecdotal level. There's very few of them, whereas with the Yazidis, it was a systematic, planned out, orchestrated thing that they did. They showed up on Sinjar Mountain on August 3rd and 4th of 2014 with empty trucks specifically to fill them with women and to take them back to use them in this underground sex trade.
And they're still doing this? I mean, they're still practicing. They're still like raping women and
absolutely.
Holding them hostage.
There were 5,000, more than 5,000 Yazidi people that were taken by ISIS starting in August of 2014, and Yazidi community leaders and the UN say that there's around 3,000 that are still in captivity. That includes women, children, and a handful of men who were allowed to live. But yes, and they a lot of them have had at some level contact with their families, because when you go to the camps in northern Iraq, a lot of the families are spending every ounce of their strength right now trying to come up with the ransoms to essentially pay the smugglers to get their girls out. So they know that they're alive. The girls will take the fighter's cell phone and run off to the bathroom and make a quick phone call, or hide his phone and wait for him to leave the house and then call. And so there's contact. We know that many of them are still alive, and it's just absolutely gutting to think what's happening to them.
So the women who you interviewed, did they escape, or were they released in return for ransom?
Almost all of the ones that I spoke to, what they would do is they would run away from the house of the man who was holding them. They would seek shelter in another civilian's house, Muslim, Kurdish, etc. In many cases, they would be handed back over to the abuser, and then terrible things would happen. But in the lucky instances, those people would then allow them to call their families. Their families are in touch with the smuggling network, and they're paying smugglers $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 per girl to get them out. There's been a big debate as to whether that money is a ransom or not. There are many cases, I think, where the money is purely going to the smugglers. There are also cases of girls that I interviewed where the fighters themselves tired of her and agreed to allow her to call her family and to negotiate a ransom for her direct release.
Right. It sounds like virtually all the sex slaves that ISIS has taken have been Yazidi women. Why are they Yazidi?
ISIS put out a pamphlet soon after they invaded Sinjar, which is the homeland of the Yazidi people, explaining why theologically the Yazidi people were targeted for enslavement, and why their enslavement is in their eyes legal. And it rests on the idea that the Yazidis are polytheists. The Yazidis actually believe in a single God, but underneath the single God, there are a number of sacred angels. It's not that different from Christianity, where you have Christ, God, and the Holy Spirit. But anyway, because of this belief in these angels, they have determined that they're polytheists, and polytheists are the worst category according to ISIS. That the earth needs to be cleansed of them in their eyes in order to create the way for the monotheistic faith that they're trying to instill. And so they have essentially created a legal framework to do these horrific things to these young women.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Rukmini Callimachi, who covers ISIS and Al-Qaeda for the New York Times. We're going to take a short break here, then we'll be back. This is Fresh Air.
WNYC is supported by The Humans, a new play by Stephen Karam, directed by Joe Mantello, now on Broadway at the Gerald Schoenfeld Theater. Tickets available at thehumansonbroadway.com.
Barack Obama is our president of the United States. You don't know what you're talking about.
WNYC.
No one wants you in the White House.
On air, online, and on